It's pretty common for me to see teenagers who've decided to become vegetarian or vegan. As parents, we may worry about this and be concerned about our teenagers' nutrient intake. For the most part, being vegetarian can be a pretty healthy lifestyle. Sometimes being vegan takes a little more intentional planning, but it can also be done well if it's done right. But sometimes I see kids who've started a new diet and they're eating a lot more plants and a lot of different foods, and they start having unwanted symptoms like diarrhea, gas, and bloating, and it can become concerning. Today I want to talk about vegetarian diets and IBS and what can cause these problems. I'm Betsy Yelmgren, registered dietitian and pediatric nutrition consultant. Teens often turn their attention towards their diet as they're learning and growing and experimenting with new things. Many times teens perceive a vegetarian diet as being healthier, or sometimes they'll try it for ethical reasons or to reduce their carbon footprint. Almost every week I see a teenager who's made some dietary changes, thinking they're doing something healthy, but they start to experience some unwanted symptoms like gas, bloating, or diarrhea, and they come to me because they're surprised that they're eating healthier foods and feeling worse. It's very important when you're making any dietary changes that you know what you're doing and that you're doing it in a healthy way. And for any teenager becoming a vegetarian, it's a good idea to look at balance and protein and nutrients and make sure that the diet is balanced. Sometimes that alone is enough to get the teenager feeling better and back on track. But in some cases, when a teenager starts eating a lot more vegetables and plant foods, and they start getting a lot more fiber in their system, it can reveal some underlying problems they didn't realize they had because they weren't eating like this in the past. We know that some of these plant foods are high in fermentable carbohydrates, and that can lead to symptoms of IBS. When we start to associate symptoms with foods we're eating, especially when they're healthy foods, there can be some negative consequences to this. Sometimes we make some changes and eliminate foods from our diet that are actually healthy to try and control the symptoms, and we may end up eating a less nutritious diet instead. Additionally, having symptoms like gas and bloating and diarrhea can prevent a teen, or really anybody, from eating the way they want to eat. Often, people end up thinking, gee, I kind of have to live with the discomfort of eating healthy foods and having gas and bloating. But it doesn't have to be that way. Vegetarian diets often rely on plants and dairy products as sources of protein. These foods are also sources of fermentable carbohydrates, or FODMAPs. One example of this is chili. Chili contains a lot of beans. And we all know what beans do in large amounts. We've all heard the song. And beans are a fermentable carbohydrate. When anybody eats way excessive amounts, you're going to have gas and you're going to have bloating, but some people are naturally going to be more inclined to that. Some other examples of FODMAPs include certain grains, dairy products like milk and yogurt, certain fruits and vegetables, and sugar-free gums and candies, certain additives. Other things teenagers like that contain a lot of FODMAPs would include smoothies or some of the Starbucks sweetened drinks. And just like anybody, if you think about fermentable carbohydrates in any amount that we overdo, you're going to get symptoms. For example, if you ate a huge amount of chili, you're eventually going to get symptoms of gas and bloating. And this is a side effect of fermentable carbohydrates that everybody is sensitive to in excessive amounts. But people who have IBS are going to be sensitive to smaller amounts too. So sometimes making a radical diet change and becoming a vegetarian reveals some of these underlying IBS symptoms that people may not have known were there. Vegetarian and plant-based diets can be very healthy lifestyles. And for most people, once you start eating more plant fibers and plant proteins, your body will adjust with time. We usually recommend going up slowly when we go to a higher fiber diet. If some time has passed and you're still having these symptoms, gas and bloating and diarrhea, it's possible that you do have some underlying IBS. In this case, we still think you can be a healthy vegetarian, but we need to find some protein sources, some good vegetarian protein sources for you that aren't as high in FODMAPs. This can be done quite easily with a little guidance. We can do something called the Low-FODMAPS diet, and we can modify this to include more vegetarian proteins and still be lower in FODMAPs, and that should help your symptoms go away after a short period of time. Then you would know if you had some underlying IBS and food sensitivities. To learn more about vegetarian diets for kids and teens, check out my conversation with Jen Caracosta on the Feed to Succeed podcast.